which I'm sure there's many artists that wishes they could reverse the process. Make a living. No one has the slightest difficulty in recognizing that there is a flow of absolutely mechanical, impersonal natural energy that runs, directs, and sustains the body. But almost no one can recognize anything remotely similar in other areas of man's operations. And perhaps we should not say that no one can recognize this, for in an insignificant and distorted way, they do. Ordinary minds will profess that certain manifestations of man's thinking and emotions seem mechanical, but whenever this claim is made, whatever is identified as an example of such is always tagged an aberration, a morbid exception to a normal man's natural, healthy state. Do you see more clearly the challenge in diagnosing to a man his present condition as being less than optimal when he has naught to compare it with? Those who have never strayed from home on their own have no way of knowing of other places. And those who never struggle against the conditions of the home in which they were born never stray. It's fair, it's just, it's super fair. Its reach being near inescapable, but just nearly so. The first step toward freedom being to recognize this. The second, to struggle against it. Fair is fair. Summary report regarding consciousness. If you're not here, you're gone. One man mused, while taxes or contributions required of me for the benefit of the government, by and large, so's my normal mental activities the same for life. Summary report update regarding consciousness. If you're still not here, you're still gone. Simply put, using more words, you're either conscious in the moment or else you're in the flow. Okay, even simpler. You're either aware of your own immediate presence or else you've forgotten that you even exist. Of course, if you're satisfied to be ordinary and stay where you are, none of this makes the slightest difference. One man's study of the matter brought him to the place where he asked himself, it would seem that the whole purpose of man's mind is to serve as an objective investigator and decision maker, and yet objectivity seems all but impossible for him. What is afoot here? Could it be that the mind's potential objectivity is hindered by man's emotions? Could they be the culprit? But wait, without emotions, man would never have survived long enough for the mind to evolve. He further pondered. The only possibility with any objective validity is that the problem, if indeed it be seen as one, must lie in the working relationship between the mind and the emotions. He said as his pondering led him onward. I wonder why no one has ever mentioned this to me before. Based on his reflections, now ask yourself, just what aspects, functions, and operations of man should be objective and non-personally prejudicial? Which one of his could be without the risk of harm? And lastly, along this line you might consider the question of, in what way might enlightenment have any connection to objectivity? Everyone wants more knowledge, but even if available, you can acquire none while engaged in self-deception. Your ability to recognize and utilize such is shut down. You are sealed up in a prison with only what you now know. A prison, though not of your own making, which survives by your passivity and acceptance of the present condition of deception. You see, it's like this. Life doesn't care who you fool, just as long as you're included. Now there's some new knowledge for you. The general flow that runs through man's mind, which he calls his thinking, his consciousness, is arranged such as to resist too strong emotional jolts. Oh, it observably doesn't mind a low level of whining over bad luck, even on a regular basis, and even a smile or laugh here and there. But it will not normally tolerate a man's experiencing passions of either a pleasant or unpleasant nature that are strong enough to disrupt its routine rhythmical run. This arrangement deftly protects the ordinary from mental destabilization and from influences that would interfere with the purpose they serve to life. But to one seeking discovery and a breakthrough in understanding, it is nothing short of a barrier. So what to do, you ask? So what to do is to grab hold of all the passion you can find and use it to intentionally interrupt, and when lucky, stop the flow. Peeping at when you're not being conscious in the moment, you're hiding from yourself. Although physically, same as all other creatures, we are total captives of life, the main source of our non-physical slavery are our own mental self-deceptions. Give those up and you're already a step closer to freedom. You cannot properly study something and learn anything new from your study if you are attempting to prove something. And you are always involved with trying to prove something when looking at things from a mental position that is in the flow. This is the name of the mental activity native to the flow, to prove something. Such is its routine responsibility, which still does not deny the observable fact that in this natural-born state, the mind, after a very early age, resists learning anything new that conflicts with what it apparently has already learned. The flow running through man, which he normally calls his thinking, the flow has its own life, purpose, and momentum, and will resist, within the mental processes of an individual man, any attempted interference with its course. But geez, if you think this is bad, just wait till we take a look at emotions in this regard. While the core cause of man's dissatisfaction is his unfinished condition, a closer to his present home factor could be seen as being his self-deception, an understandable reaction to his incompleteness whereby he pretends to have abilities he does not yet possess. Until you independently realize that life itself is alive, you will keep looking for the sources of each of your problems, and there are none. Each time you allow a conversation to be replayed in your mind, you are being deceived. Or if you want it from the routine perspective, every time you replay a conversation in your mind, you're deceiving yourself. Take your choice, knock yourself out. One man decided to see how many times a day he could remember to say the word bright. He was surprised at what transpired. There was once a mighty warrior who conquered many lands, amassed a great fortune, and whose name was known throughout the world. And in his later years, after much reflection, he came to a conclusion that if man's memory were but better, there is little that he can dream of that he could not accomplish. There was yet another student of certain matters, certain subjects, whose studies eventually led him to inquire of himself. It would surely seem that man's mind was constructed as it is so that he could use it to willfully focus his attention on a specific matter and thus study it in a manner superior to anything previously known. And yet this is not so. Man does not normally focus his attention. It's focused for him. Or, more precisely put, not focused for him, but rather defocused, splintered and dispersed for him by the mental activity naturally and constantly running through him. Why might this be? In direct opposition to what patently appears to be the very purpose for which he was given an intellect. Is something wrong here, or is there something in operation that I have yet to see? Any area in life in which additional growth is possible will always first be spotted as a place of potential, and the mind will come up with a name for it, and before anyone notices, man will begin to believe that is, deceive himself that the potential has become a fait accompli. But don't stop there. In various ways this can be pointed out to ordinary men, but they will see it as a criticism of man, perhaps a flaw justifiably such, but are never able to see it as an efficient assist to measured growth. One guy started trying to butter up life by saying things like, "Yo, life, you some life, you my main life," and stuff like that. The higher level question of, "Hey, where you at? Everyone's physique is in town, but holy whiz, where is the rest of them?" Yeah. The question of self-deception in your face. The thinking of things that by common consensus are not true is not the form of self-deception of consequence to the few, but rather the taking of the thoughts that pass through you as being what you think. The question of doing. In the beginning, the only thing that a man can do is to struggle against what he has been doing. This can make getting started seem difficult, since instead of going somewhere, at first it seems like you're only involved in wrangling with where you already are. It can appear to be a process of trying to give certain things up as opposed to obtaining new things, which is not the normal course that attracts men. About all a man can do is pray for bad weather every 3 or 4 days. Self-knowledge. You can never learn anything new and useful about yourself if you undertake the study from any point of view already instilled in you by life. Forget drugs and alcohol. The hardest thing for man to give up is his self-deception. An anxious man must carry around with him his own slap in the face. And you already have the hand, your attention. In regard to the creation and construction of man, one investigator began to so consider, is it possible that the mind was an add-on? Yeah. A little accessory that man received as some sort of bonus for some reason? And the answer is, to be more stably conscious is to be able to be different than you were before, able to act differently, think differently, and react to feelings differently. And the question is, so why stay the same? Here's a handy pocket-sized test you can carry with you to help determine whether or not at any given moment you're engaged in self-deception. And the test is whether or not you feel simmering anywhere within you any amount of anger. By the way, this also serves as another test. Upon hearing it described, if you immediately reject it, you're ordinary. As long as you still don't realize that life is thinking for you, same as it pumps your blood and runs your respiration for you, you will continue to find, if for no other reason than due to the number of ideas passing through you, that some of them strike you with disfavor. And as long as you do not recognize that life, plain, simple, unadored life, not your specific circumstances or past, is responsible for running them through you, you will take the whole thing quite personally, when no such thing is justified. and which just a modicum of investigation would clearly reveal. And dig it. You can't blame this tangle on life, not when it has made available to you the way out. And wow, I hope you're still waiting for us to take such as this into where it relates to the emotions. As regards run and hide. You can hide from yourself, that is, deceive yourself, but you can't really run from yourself, now can you? In the effort to calm and control your consciousness, it is forever a question not of success, but of trying. Trying is the success. A father noted to a son, "Do you realize that those who pray for release from their pride and vanity, by their own words reveal that they understand as little about life as is humanly possible?" All right. I'll rewrite it on the spot. A father noted to a son, "Do you realize that those who pray for release from their pride and vanity, by their own words, reveal that they understand as little about themselves as is possible for a human to do?" All right. Either that or their world-class stupidity. Not vanity. Beyond its small, immediately obvious uses, the greater purpose of talk is for the sake of man's self-deception. Then there was this other guy who, often when alone, would break out in this big old smile and say aloud, "Hi, life. How's it going?" And his smile would get so wide and bright that he'd almost float away. What the ordinary calls sin, the more perceptive would think of as distraction, a form of stupidity, which is the only thing that ever makes them feel guilty. Back to problems. You investigate problems, not negotiate with them.
No.
Give you another version of that as long as I'm here before. As regards questions, you investigate questions, not negotiate with them. Which is what it meant anyway. Life runs the flow through man at a measured tempo. What an intent man must do is establish in himself his own personally measured tempo of awareness as he yet navigates within the general flow. It is through such an approach that one has access to the longed-for condition of consciousness. To be honest with yourself about yourself is not something you simply decide to do. It is something you must learn to do. A real warrior does not drown in defeat. He does not drown in hardship. He does not drown in aging. A real warrior drowns in but one thing: loss of passion. What is to be resisted is not the overall flow of life, but the smaller one running through you. It is the difference between being bitter and critical and having the capacity to joyously appreciate life as it is, in a state of endless growth and change. The secret. Must the secret really be secret? I think I'll just tell you what it is. The difference between what life is and what men think it is, that is the secret. Satisfied? Apparently not, for one man asked. Is there some surefire way to keep out of the flow and free from self-deception? Yes. Stay absolutely focused on whatever you are at the moment engaged in. But that's too simple, he says. I know, I reply. The basis of man's as we've described it here in the past, of man's dissatisfaction. I'm not changing the game. I mean, you can see it for yourself. The core, the basis of all dissatisfaction is the fact that man is an unfinished piece of work. But a closer to home, a smaller, a perhaps more manageable, an interim view could be seeing that a cause within a cause, a lesser cause of the dissatisfaction is in a kind of, and I must admit I spent long seconds considering making up a new term, but it's self-deception, fooling yourself. And as always, the reason that I spent that inordinate amount of energy and time considering coming up with a new phrase is because self-deception, fooling oneself, has always been common, and as time goes by it becomes increasingly common, and it nowadays has almost a cliched parlor, if not professional, psychological connotation to it that renders it all but impotent or useless. But because it's always taken, or is taken now by those who would use such a term, to be a psychological malady, that it is something only caused by a person, something in their past, something in their circumstance has led a person's psyche, it's led it into some sort of cul-de-sac, or there's been some trauma in their past where by now they cannot face themselves. I understand that. But what they don't understand is that no one can face themselves. People do not face themselves. The further up in the parade of progress you are, the more educated and sophisticated you are, the less you can face yourself. It is not a psychological problem. It is not a flaw. It is not something that a person decides to do. It is not something that they do because of some unconscious motivation. It is due to the fact that man is incomplete. But the mind, as one man surmised in a news item tonight, he wondered, I take it he was thinking of man in an allegorical sense, or in a sense of a simile with automobiles. The man was pondering whether the mind was not just some sort of add-on, an accessory that man was given for some reason. If that were true, if you look at it that way for just ad hoc purposes, then the mind is serving two purposes itself in the overall growth and evolution of life through man, is it can dream of the future. It is not like humanity, wittingly or otherwise, it's not like humanity and individual men are marching blindly toward the future. Anyone who predicts the future, I'll point out gladly again to you, is an idiot. But it's not as though men are blindly marching into a totally unknown future, because all you must do to have a general notion of what the future is to, if you're capable of doing it, is to consider the many and specifically just several claims that men make about themselves, which by the slightest effort at an objective consideration of the matter is fallacious. The idea of free will. It will not stand up, is why it's such a favorite, continuing historical favorite subject for philosophers, because you can write every 10 years, or now your son or your grandson can write a whole new paper and get his doctoral degree on the same subject. It is an endless merry-go-round, but it is demonstratively so, observably so, to any mind that meets any criteria as being reasonable. All you've got to do is look at the matter of free will, and it's laughable. But all right, I'll take a sidestep. Most of you should already be doing this sort of thing for yourself. It is it could not be more glaringly true, what I just said, that the idea of freedom of will is just an illusion. It could not be more obviously so. So why is it that man cannot see it? Because if they saw it, everything would stop. Is where I was back to the main track, as that is one of the primary purposes played by the mind, is it attributes to itself and to man, but specifically to itself, abilities that it does not possess. But I'll just tell you a fact. The only reason it attributes it is because they are abilities in waiting. They're nascent, latent abilities. And I don't mean specifically that freedom of will is something that just down the road a piece, if we all, if we all stick together and remain decent men and women and good Italians or Jews or Christians, and we pay our taxes, and life smiles upon us, that somewhere down the road we're going to take a turn in the parade, and suddenly, the big guy or life or fate will be there and go, all right, here, and it gives everybody freedom of will. I give you a little more credit than such crudeness, but that which freedom of will represents in a broad spectrum, in a broad definition, an understanding of the term, anything that appears to be positive for man. It doesn't mean that everything that man dreams is going to come true, but every positive dream, not from my definition, but any dream that humanity in general holds, that by their own definition, if you said, well, in other words, the idea of life after death, a physical life after death, and there being a place of punishment and a place of reward, heaven and hell, as the Protestants call it. If either one exists, see, man can imagine both. It is heaven. It's not hell. Because that which men imagine that would not, by their own definition, not mine, but by collective wisdom, the kind of conventional collective thinking that life puts into man, if the dream has nothing that would appear to be of a positive nature, then you can dismiss it. Such as the idea that many people have that life is going downhill. The society is falling apart. Maybe where you are is coming apart. Everything lives and everything dies. But the idea that humanity is sliding downhill and on an irreversible course is not true. I'm just giving you a thumbnail law I never thought to put in words, but anything that man can dream of, I'll put it to you this way, is possible, or he couldn't dream of it. But anything he dreams of that has no positive connotation to it, no positive aspect, no aspect of it by any ordinary view is positive, beneficial, then you can discount that dream. It is not part of man's future. It is not operationally of any significance. It may be to you individually, because as always you're going to die. And to each individual, that's the severe bad news. So in that sense, if you dream you're going to die, remember this, it's not a dream. You're going to die. No, that's that. But anything else, we're elaborating on, well, we're all going to die, and then they're going to torture me after that. If you say so. I mean, if you insist on suffering that much, all right. What I was going to, or what I had said was, I was going to call self-deception for the time being, is not any psychological ploy. It's not that simple, and it is not individually based. It arises nowhere from your individual background, your life experience. It is everyone's experience on this planet. Ordinary men know that by and large there's a lot of, let me use just some colloquialisms for a second, so that you'll all understand. So there's no doubt I'm not getting into any area that's that arcane. Ordinary men have a general awareness. They use it in everyday conversation, that there's a whole lot of role playing, as they would call it, a whole lot of pretending going on. They can stand in a bar or a restaurant and point out people who are really preening and posing. They can look at world leaders. They can point to a TV and watch a prime minister or some religious leader walk by, and they can observe. Not that it means anything, because they end up being critical, and so they lose any possibility of learning anything from it. But they can see a world leader come strutting out in some palace in some country, or a religious leader walk out amidst all the splendor of his particular church, and they'll make some comment and they'll say something like, "Look at that stuck-up, look at that stuffed bastard. Who the hell does he think he is?" And it's not just on the basis of criticism. As I said, it always ends up as that, and so they don't learn anything. But the point is, you can look from everybody, from a person standing at the end of the bar, trying to strike poses. It's obvious he's trying to get some girl's attention over there, and he's going all this, and guys standing there punching each other like, get a load of him. He's not that good looking anyway, and he's got on last year's suit, and him trying to go. And it's almost laughable. But not just on that low level, they can see it in world leaders. Not that one's more important than the other, but I'm just trying to show you that it is not unknown. It is part of conventional thinking under specific conditions to recognize that people pretend, and sometimes so obviously that it's laughable. And yet, in the very instances where it is so observable that it's laughable, they never notice this. They don't take into account, but I'll point out to you. That is when it's like an inverse ratio. That if you're observing, in just an ordinary person, the more laughable it is, that is, the more that they're pretending doesn't fit. That this guy striking the pose and trying to do this, and he's got on an out-of-date suit, it doesn't even fit good. He doesn't meet the local criteria of being handsome. His nose is too big, his haircut, it's homemade. And him doing this, you think, oh, come on. And the inverse ratio is, though, the more observably laughable. That is, that the man, what he is posing, is so far removed from what he is, and they don't know what he is, they've never seen him. They just know, that is not you. All right. The more laughable it is, the more observable, the more undeniably, the more attention-grabbing, observably deceptive it is, the less likelihood, the less there's any chance that the person doing it has any awareness of it. So the more gross be the deception, the less the person has any knowledge of it, any awareness of it. Surely everybody sees that. It's not that, maybe as always I managed to put it in too many words with sentences too complex and inverted, but it is obvious. If you think about 1 second, even if I hadn't made much of an example, if I just made the statement and you think about it a second, it's obvious that it is going to be that the person involved with some form of deception, he is going to be less likely to have any awareness of it the more gross, the more gross be the deception, the self-deception. Or else how could he do it? Still assuming that he's a relatively sane person. We're not talking about somebody out of the mainstream wiring of life, that under ordinary conditions, he's an ordinary guy, as well as the people laughing at him. But for the deception to reach such a point, for it to be so gross, so almost a burlesque of what he's attempting to do, a parody of something, but it's obviously not him, the more it is exaggerated to that degree, the less he has any awareness on a gradual scale. I mean, once you see it, it has to be, assuming he's just a sane, ordinary guy. Because if he had any awareness, he couldn't act in such a foolish manner. Is anybody already prepared that I was going to drag that back to a man and what passes for your own thinking processes? The deception, I'll get to that in a second. Let's jump back where I was some time ago. This kind of self-deception is not based upon what I'm referring to. The general scope is not based upon merely or simply the attempt for a man to draw attention to himself. It is not to try and pick up people of the opposite sex. It is not to simply impress others with your faux or your pretend social standing by dressing or acting or speaking a certain way. All of that certainly takes place in life. But that is not of any significance. And that is simply, as ordinary minds would have it, that's a minor symptom springing from a larger symptom. That is a zit on top of a festering mole. Or a small zit on a big zit, if you like. If that's not getting too Zenish, which is one of their stories of how creation is founded. That was one of the Chinese. Oh no, that's turtle. That's turtle. I'm sorry, it's turtles on turtles. I keep thinking it's zits on zits on zits. Different cosmological view. The deception manifests, or the deception could be seen as a reaction of people claiming that they have freedom of will, people saying that they are fully conscious and responsible, which none of this will hold up, as we all know. We've been through it enough times, and you've got your whole life to observe. For a man to say, I'm conscious, I know what I'm doing, you know it's not true. Not in theory. You say, well, what are you going to say next? Well, how'd you decide that? Did you decide you're going to... The idea that people are making conscious decisions as to what they will do is simply laughable. It's observably not so. All you've got to do is look. All you've got to do is try to look. It means nothing to ordinary people. If they could be made to see it, I'll do not hesitate to admit again, it would simply wreck everything. And they're not going to. But if you could make ordinary men see that, hey, you're helpless. Your whole life is self-deception. If you could grab a man and hold him like his face underwater and say, do you see it? Do you see it? And him finally go, you're right, I do. And you let him go. Boy, would he thank you. You'd go right in his will. He'd probably follow you around the rest of his life, seeking what little small favors he could do for you in recompense. Which, of course, is silliness. You would have ruined him. You would have absolutely wrecked his life. So it cannot be done. If anything, life protects itself. If you think you protect yourself, if you think the body's immune system protects itself, if you think nations protect themselves, look at life. Because all that's going on inside of life. Life protects itself, and the flow going through man, passing for his individuality, passing for his thinking, passing for his consciousness, if it's not anything, it is resilient. Because all you've got to do is try and interfere with your own thinking processes, as you call it. To interfere with what I was calling tonight the flow. The traffic going through you, the horse running, all you got to do is try to interfere with it. If you told that to an ordinary person, again, to show you how life is arranged at self-protection, and for some reason you caught someone's attention, an ordinary man's attention, he'd go, wait a minute, that's kind of interesting. You say that the mind, I'd rather call it thought processes. He says, okay, your thought processes. You're saying that they are run at kind of a deliberate, measured tempo. They run with a kind of resiliency so strong that you cannot interfere with it. Yeah, that's about what I said. They go, wait a minute. Well, now, when you say interfere, exactly what do you mean specifically? Well, what part of interfere don't you understand? I mean, try and change. Just try and interfere with it. See, I tried to trick him. I said interfere to start with rather than to change it, because then a man immediately has got some defense, or his mind does, like, oh, change it. So you've already figured out that I'm a liberal, and you're saying try and change your thinking to conservative. Not change, just interfere. I mean, there's traffic flying by, and you take it as being you. Just try to interfere with it. Try to run out in traffic like, say, stop a minute. Not to stop and tell people to get out of their car and get in somebody else's car. Just try to interfere with the flow, and you'll see. You can stop it. All you got to do is go, all right, let's see. And it stopped. And you go, wow, and it went back. And you can get ordinary people even to see that. And they go, wow. And then you say, well, wait a minute. Now, you stopped it right then, right? You understood what I meant. And he goes, well, yeah, I never thought about it, but yeah, I can stop it. I said, all right, now do it again. He goes, all right. He goes, wow, that is neat. And I go, no. You held it, I don't have a stopwatch, you held it, let's say, a second. He goes, yeah. Hold it for 10 seconds. You might as well ask an ordinary man to pole vault 30 feet in the air. Without a pole, just using a certain aroused member of his You're asking the impossible for a man. The self-deception, back to the main core, and I'll get back to where I was a little more specifically. All of these things, such as men with no analyzation, because it will not stand anything resembling objective scrutiny. It simply will not. But men attribute to themselves individual conscious thought. And the more you are an ordinary, sane, reasonable person, as you should be, the more you will insist that's true. The less you have any ability to see otherwise. But if you to tell a man, you understand, I'm just talking about in ordinary terms, when you reach the forefront, or at least up front, in the current, whenever current is, in the current evolution of man, wherever humanity is right now, up toward the front, the closer you are toward the front, that is, you'd normally be educated, you'd be quite civil, you'd probably be very sophisticated in the present non-pejorative sense, but you would be well-traveled, you would have a certain largeness of mind as opposed to the less civilized and developed people at the end of the line, at the end of the parade. You would have a certain kind of flexibility, a certain kind of sophisticated tolerance. And so to tell such a person, if you tried to tell, the closer they are to that status, and it's automatic, they did not strive to get there. Of course, try to tell them that. They go, I work 3 jobs. Or my old man, went to jail for 20 years for all his activities so that I could inherit his money and go to Harvard. He'll tell you all that. Well, you know that. If you tell a man where you are right now, he goes, yes, no matter where it is. And you go, what? It took no effort to get there. Well, again, you know damn well that you'll be dismissed as an idiot, as you're supposed to be. But a fairly sophisticated person who you would think would have some potential ability to hear something, if you tried to tell them that what they take to be their own consciousness and their own thinking bears no more relationship to them, is nothing any more personal to them than the size of their nose, the color of their hair, the color of their skin, their sex, that it has no more personal connection to them, it is nothing of any more personal nature than their gender, their race, their height. They go, well, what's that a metaphor for? And if you want, that's not a metaphor. They'd go, ooh, I got to get out of here. And they'd get away from you. Because the mind must say it is obviously not true when. All they would have to do, now I'm going to have to say theoretically, which there's no such word to fit what I mean, because it's not theoretical. What I'm about to say would work, except they can't do it. They won't do it. And so it remains a theory. Well, what I'm saying is a person of any sort of intellectual capacity, if they would look at the very attributes, such as their thinking processes they're responsible for, they hold ideas based on their own experience, on their own study, on their own reflection, and you go, not so. They go, are you serious? And you go, yeah. I go, think about it. Just observe, is what's going through your mind right this second, are you responsible for that? And at first, everyone, they go, well, certainly it is. Who else is? And I go, no, don't just answer that. Let's stop for 1 second and just try to catch a glimpse. Because as soon as you look up, the parade's going to stop. Traffic's going to come to a halt, and you can't see it when it's not in motion. It just stops. Or as I put it to you, it's like the horse running, and you look at it, it stops its forward motion, but it just stands there in place. Traffic seems to stop. Everybody's sitting there in their car, and the engine's still idling. They don't cut them off. They're just waiting for you to look off, and then it's... But if you speak to a man and you say, your thought processes, that has no relationship to you personally, everything that you think. And if you do convince him that you don't mean this allegorically, and I say, well, just look, just right now, right quick, look and see what's going through your mind. And of course, he'd be hard-pressed to even look fast enough and have any experience to say anything, but if he did catch a glimpse. I can put it to you another way. None of this proves anything, but I'm just trying to get you people another view of what's going on. For whatever reason, men can remember their dreams oftentimes, their nighttime dreams, for a bit after they wake up. Most people can. They can remember that more vividly, and for some length of time, maybe the last at least 2 or 3 seconds of some dream when they awoke, than they can during their regular waking state. And you tell a man, tell me what's going on in your mind just then. And it's like trying to catch a dream when you just woke up. And men will go, and as sincere as they can be, they usually can't tell you. And you go, well, something was going on in your mind, wasn't it? Because I'm getting, well, of course, a lot of people go, well, I guess, which just shows how much awareness. All they know is there's noise going on. There's something going on in my head as long as I can remember. Everybody calls it thinking. All their parents, everybody around calls it thinking, being conscious. And you ask a man, are you conscious? They go, well, hell yeah. But you can't press it like, well, you ever thought about it? I mean, do you have any personal conception of what being conscious is? You know. I can skip all the dramatics. You push that a little bit and somebody's going to go. Because they think, well, you're crazy. Everybody's conscious. And you go, well, okay, I'm not saying they're not, but how did you arrive at that? How are you convinced of that? Well, everybody's conscious. I mean, like that proves something. If you ask a man, right quick, if you catch something that you were thinking, so let's assume he could bounce up quick enough, and he had the ability, and he caught the last few seconds of what was going on, the replaying of a conversation, the singing of a song, the whining about something, God knows what. I mean, like there's an infinite choice, but I'll give people the blues like I know what it is and actually give you the number and you go, bummer. If you don't be bummed out that way, you find it out. But at any rate, let's say if the man did glance up and he caught a tail end, like you do in a dream. Now, no sane people, no ordinary people take their dreams personally. And we all know that people think that they have some metaphorical significance, some people do. But an ordinary man, if he wakes up in some grotesque, fantastic dream, a man just wakes up and it's just a dream, probably the anchovies from last night. He got cold, who knows what. But he doesn't take it personally. He says, wow, a dream. And they'll let that go, that my mind will do things when I'm not on guard. When I'm asleep and I can't help myself, for some reason, my mind will do very unusual things, things of which I cannot be held responsible. Okay, all right. And you ask a man, but are you responsible for what goes on during the day? Well, sure I am. Really? Yeah, really, why? Are you sure? You mean, am I sure that I'm responsible for what's going on inside of my brain? Yeah? And of course, he's convinced he is. But if you ask him, and he had the ability, if I say, all right, I just look and see. Look right now, what's going on. If he had the ability, as I said, as many people do when they awaken, it just happens, that he could suddenly look up and catch the last few seconds what he was thinking. Right there would be all the proof. I wouldn't have to say anything. Of course, understand all this is a make-believe scenario because it can't be done. If I could do it, I wouldn't do it to an ordinary person. But if he looked up and saw it, I wouldn't have to say anything. Because he'd realize, what in the goddamn hell was that? On the basis that we were discussing, I said, you're not responsible. What goes through your mind, what you call your consciousness, you're not responsible for. Not theoretically, not some parts of it, not some traumatized, malignant aberrations in you caused by some experience, all of it. And the man goes, you're crazy. Well, look and see. Tell me what's going on right this second. And he goes, if I had a good fictitious man I'm describing that had the ability, the true intellectual ability, nothing mystical, but just the intellectual ability to be objective and to look at something, all I'd have to do is say, look right now and tell me what it is. And he'd go, and he could look at me like, wow. Because there it would be. Whatever it was, all you got to do is look up at any time. It doesn't matter when. I wouldn't have to pick out a specific time. It's not a trick. I wouldn't have to find out, what's your sign? What's your internal rhythms? It's not a trick. Anytime, day or night, if I'm speaking about daytime, ask a man to do that, and he looks up. And if he had any ability to be objective, he'd realize his sensation. He wouldn't realize anything, but the sensation would be, what the hell is this? And the sensation would be, there may be some truth in what you said. It does not happen, cannot happen, it's not supposed to happen. But the two things I was trying to hit tonight was the general attribution, self-attribution that men give themselves and each other. They usually do it to each other under adverse conditions so that they can hold their person responsible. But the whole basis that ordinary men consider themselves unique and consider worthy of the mantle of man is such thing. It's not limited. I could describe it in several ways, but the obvious ones being that you have freedom of will, that you can do what you want to within the physical laws of science, and that you're conscious, and with that goes the fact that whatever is going through your mind, which constitutes to people, if you ask them, when you say, are you conscious? And they go, yeah. And you go, what is consciousness? They go, well, it's being able to stand up and walk around, not in a coma. And I go, no, we know that. But what is consciousness to you personally? In a man, what is consciousness? You go, well, it's his mental activity, his thought processes, his mental awareness. Okay. And then if you say, are you responsible? I go, yeah. I'm responsible for the clothes I wear. I picked them out. I'm responsible for the way I dress, my haircut. I'm responsible, for my weight. I'm responsible for the shape I'm in. And sure, I'm responsible for this. Giving, the first one of deception, is giving yourself, that man give themselves credit, not because of stupidity, not because of psychological flaws within them, but they give themselves, everyone, all sane people, give themselves credit for abilities they patently, observably do not possess, but for a very good reason. It is a pre-echo of the future. It is the very direction in which man is going, and it is a gradual process. So it is like a reaction to being incomplete. If we were complete, in the same sense, to make that kind of comparison again, if we were a complete finished product when born, such as a lion, even if a lion had, got to make my fables, of course, work in every possible direction, if a lion was still born as a lion, a finished lion, and yet, on top of that, had the ability to think, he would never engage in self-deception. Because if you're a finished product, there's nothing to be deceived about. You can't even conceive of deception. You can't conceive of being anything else. You're it. You're a frog. You're not a tadpole. So if you're born a frog, if you did not go through the process, and there was no interim, there was no growth, that you were born as you are, what I'm calling tonight self-deception is absolutely impossible. It's not a theory. Just think about it right quick. That's long enough. You're born a lion. That's all you're going to be. You can't be any less. You can't be any more. No matter what you do, you'll always be a lion. You can't become a smarter lion. You can't become a stronger lion. You can't become a more talented lion. You can't become a lion with a portfolio. You can't become a lion who lives in a better neighborhood. That's it. So the idea of self-deception, even if they had a mind, in other words, they had the potential for self-deception, it wouldn't exist. If you could tell a lion, we have a thing called self-deception, and you got a mind, hell, you can do it. Come on, try it. I mean, just as a game, just try it. And the lion said, okay, I'll go along with that. And it goes, And they go, what do you do? Well, you imagine that you have abilities you don't have. He is a full-fledged lion, nothing more, nothing less. And he goes, I don't know. The only way that you can engage in any self-deception is by being unfinished. It is a kind of self-protective, and other reasons, but that's one way to look at it, self-protective mechanism that life puts in man to help compensate for being dissatisfied. That everyone's dissatisfied. Nothing satisfies. We're not talking about at the physical level. At the non-physical level, man cannot be satisfied. No theory, no religious belief. Ideas, he has yet to find ideas that will satisfy him. Any sort of knowledge will satisfy him. And it's somewhat as a compensation for that is to dream that he has abilities he doesn't. It sort of makes up for it. No one can see it that way. It's not the way it's analyzed. But, this means but. Yeah. But. Yeah, because this is and. All right. But. A wider view that perhaps we'll pick up more next time, but the biggest self-deception within the self-deceptions from the view of someone attempting to pursue activities such as this is taking what appears to be your consciousness and your thoughts as being what you think. In one sense, every other form of self-deception flows therefrom. Because without that, there is no other form of self-deception. And what I was trying to get to, so that you know I didn't make hollow promises, is there is an uncharted, unnoted area in the human nervous system between the domains that would at first appear to be strictly emotional and those strictly of the mind, of the intellect, wherein self-deception plays its greatest part, whereas it's where it lurks. It's like the cave where it hides and men do not see. I mean, men know, as I said, men know that, hey, I see that guy, boy, is he fooling himself. They know that people try to deceive, and at a very crude level, they know that people attempt to defraud one another by simple outright lying, like, well, here, 3 cards, and I'm going to lay them all down, and the ace of spades will be one of these. But somebody said, give me $50, and I'll have the truck come, he's just down the street, and for $50, we got some leftover asphalt, and I'll do your driveway. Everybody knows that somebody will engage in self-deceit on that physical level. But on a higher level, as a mental level, which we'll get into. But a mental deceit is easy. It will eventually be found out. You cannot hide mental deceit. But there is another form of deceit that is almost impossible to catch. And that is where men deceive themselves. That's where men deceive each other. But not as a flaw and not as any sort of hindrance to the growth of man, but as a lubricant. So until next time, be sure and lubricate yourselves adequately, if not properly.